Hello everybody, Mobius1 here, bringing you another Star Wars Unlimited video. This time I've got some tips or advice for players who are just starting to get into the Star Wars Unlimited trading card game. Specifically, what cards from sets 1 through 3 that you may want to consider buying. It's important to know that when Star Wars Unlimited's 7th card set releases in March of 2026, we will see the game's first set rotation, making cards from sets 1 through 3 no longer playable in most formats. Because of this, it's understandable that players just getting into the game may be hesitant to drop money on cards that are only standard legal for another 9 to 10 months. That's where I hope this video can help. I'm going to show you 3 cards from each aspect combination from each of Unlimited's first 3 sets, but to make it interesting, I will not be showing you any legendary cards in this video. While there are absolutely some powerful legendary cards in the game's first 3 sets, some of them can be a little pricey, and the point of this particular video is to provide some good, relatively cheap options for new players looking to pick up some tools for their decks. If you like this video and you want me to do a legendary guide in the future, leave a comment below and let me know. I'll add timestamps to the video description for each aspect color, so if you're looking to see what I recommend picking up for a specific color, feel free to jump to that point in the video. And if you're really new to Star Wars Unlimited and you're not sure what aspect color you'd like to play, I made another useful video breaking down the strengths of each color in the game. You can find a link to that video in this video's description. Let's get started. Starting off with Aggression Villainy from Spark of Rebellion, you're absolutely going to want to grab some Ruthless Raiders. This 6-cost, 4/6 space unit does 2 damage to an enemy unit and an enemy base, both when played and when defeated. This is a super powerful effect and has made the card see regular play since release. Fallen Lightsaber has always been a strong card, giving a unit +3/+3 and, if it's a Force unit, a 1 damage AoE when it attacks, but with Set 5 Legends of the Force releasing in just over a month from the time of recording this video, Fallen Lightsaber is definitely going to see some play with all the new Force users coming to the game. And speaking of Force users, Fifth Brother has up to this point been one of Aggression Villainy only low-cost Force units, and while that's likely going to change after Set 5, I wouldn't be surprised if Fifth Brother was still included in decks that are looking for some early game Force or even Inquisitor synergies. Moving on to Shadows of the Galaxy, unfortunately there wasn't a ton here that I'd really recommend. Punishing One isn't a bad card. As a 3-cost, 3/4 space unit, it's fine. Its ability to ready itself when an upgraded enemy unit is defeated once a round is okay if you can pull it off. It was better back when Set 2 first launched with all of the bounty synergies, but over time it's ended up seeing less play. The same is more or less true with Dengar. Decks these days simply don't play as many upgrades on enemy units as they did in the Set 2 meta, but a 1-cost 2/2 with the Underworld and Bounty Hunter traits may still be worth including in decks that care about that. And while I really struggled to find a decent third option for this category, I ended up just going with Guavian Antagonizer for more or less the same reason as Dengar. A 1-cost 2/3 with the Underworld and Trooper traits may be useful in a deck that synergizes with those tags, but you're probably not missing out on much if you skip this one. Looking at Aggression Villainy from Twilight of the Republic, Count Dooku is a solid card to pick up, especially going into Legends of the Force, since he has the Force and Sith traits. While he costs 8 resources, Exploit 2 means you can get him into play for as little as 4, and if you do, his when played lets you get some value out of the units you sacrifice in the form of damage. The Series Officer is a decent card to pick up if you're building an aggro deck looking for a turn 1 play that guarantees some damage to base. It even goes super well on a red Thrawn deck, allowing you to double its when defeated. And at 7 resources with no immediate impact on the board, Savage Press has been a little too expensive and slow to see play in the current meta, but I went with him as my third choice because of, again, the potential Force and even Knight synergies that we may see in Set 5. Switching over to Aggression Heroism, K2SO from Spark of Rebellion is a great card. 4 for a 4 4/4 is a bit below rate, but his when defeated ability, giving you the option to have each opponent either take 3 damage to base or discard a card, is super powerful. Both Overwhelm and the Rebel trait are nice bonuses for him as well. Sabine has been a pretty solid turn 1 play for Aggression Heroism since the game launched. While her ability to avoid being attacked can sometimes keep her safe, a 2/3 that swings as a 3/3 or deals that 1 extra damage to base when it isn't necessary is just pretty good, and she's also Rebel. Green Squadron A-Wing is another really solid turn 1 play, especially after Jump to Lightspeed's addition of pilot upgrades. Threatening 3 damage on turn 2, or even potentially more with a pilot, is super strong. Oh yeah, it's also Rebel. In Shadows of the Galaxy, Rebel decks got yet another powerful tool with Cassian Andor. Not only is 3 for a 3/5 a solid stat line, but his ability to be smuggled into play as a readied unit means you can surprise your opponent with some unexpected base damage, which is always nice in an aggressive deck. Wrecker is pushing it a little bit when it comes to cost in an aggression deck, but his powerful when played ability more than makes up for it. Giving up a resource for 5 damage to a ground unit is usually a good trade-off in decks that are trying to close out games fast, and if you can give him ambush on top of that, his 7 attack with Overwhelm can end up winning games instantly if your opponent's base has enough damage on it already. There wasn't really a great third pick for this category either, so I ended up going with Ketsu Onyo simply because she's another decent turn 1 play with 3 power and 2 HP for only 2 resources. She has Saboteur, which lets her ignore Sentinels, and her ability that when she deals combat damage to an enemy base lets you defeat an upgrade that costs 2 or less. Her traits don't seem to be super important with Mandalorian, Underworld, and Bounty Hunter. If we end up seeing more Mandalorian synergies in the future, that could make her better, but you're probably safe passing on that one. From Twilight of the Republic, I had to go with Senatorial Corvette. While it doesn't see a ton of play, this card has been surprisingly good in Aggression Heroism decks that try to discard their opponent's hand. With 5 power, the Senatorial Corvette isn't something your opponent can ignore for more than a couple of rounds, and when they finally do decide to get rid of it, they end up having to discard something from their hand, which just puts pressure on them in a different way. On the other hand, Anakin Skywalker is a well-statted 6/6 for 5 that, if you can enable Coordinate by having 2 other units in play alongside him, draws you a card when he attacks. This is another example of a card that hasn't seen a ton of play, but again, with Legends of the Force coming, he may very well end up making his way into a few decks. You're gonna be hearing me say that quite a lot in this video. Anakin's Interceptor kinda fits the same slot as the Green Squadron A-Wing from before, being a decent turn 1 play that can set up a vehicle for a pilot on turn 2, but it also has the Jedi trait, which again, may be useful in set 5, so maybe worth considering. Taking a look at some purely aggression cards, you absolutely must grab Force Throw from Spark of Rebellion. It's discard, it's cheap, and it's Force synergy. Yeah, this card is great, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. Disabling Fangfighter is another card from early in Unlimited's life that has continued to see play. A decently statted unit that defeats an upgrade when it's played, which can be a pilot, a lightsaber, a shield. It's just good, and it's going to stay good for the foreseeable future. Open Fire isn't flashy, but 4 damage for 3 resources is fair. This card still sometimes finds its way into competitive decks, and it's a safe buy for someone looking to play aggression. Along that same line, Daring Raid from Shadows of the Galaxy is 2 damage for 1. This is both a great way to finish off an enemy unit with 1 or 2 HP remaining, as well as push for lethal with a couple of extra points of damage to base if needed. Pillage is absolutely devastating if played at the right time or against the right deck. While it isn't used in every aggression deck, it's often a good sideboard choice to use against certain opponents. I ended up choosing Hunting Nexu as my third pick here, simply because we know we're going to be getting some creature synergies in Legends of the Force. A 4-cost 4/4 with conditional raid 2 isn't bad. There's just often better cards to include in your deck over this. But if that creature tag can be used to either cheat this into play a little sooner or buff it in some other way, Hunting Nexu may actually start seeing play. And lastly, for aggression, we've got Kit Fisto from Twilight of the Republic. Like Wrecker, he's a 6-cost 7/6, but unlike Wrecker, he does not have an immediate impact on the board. He does, however, have the Force and Jedi traits, which as I've said, could make him stronger after the next set drops. We'll have to see. Heavy, just like the Hunting Nexu, is a 4-cost 4/4 with conditional raid 2, but he also comes with an AoE when he's defeated. He's not a great card for competitive play, but if you're on a budget, there are worse choices. And since I really struggled to find a good third option here, I decided to include Caught in the Crossfire, simply because this card is hilarious to play in Twin Suns. If you're a new player with an interest in Unlimited's 4-player free-for-all format, Caught in the Crossfire is an absolute riot when you force 2 different opponents' units to attack one another. I cannot recommend this card for Premier, but if Twin Suns is your jam, make sure you have a copy of this. With Command Villainy, Overwhelming Barrage is a must-have. This card is one of the most powerful cards in the game and is in 99.9% of green-black decks. It's both a temporary buff as well as targeted damage dealing in one. You really can't ask for much more. The Super Laser Technician is on nearly the same power level. A unit that becomes not only a resource, but a readied resource when it dies allows you to ramp and actually play your more expensive cards in the same round. Incredibly powerful. Relentless is what I'd consider a sideboard staple. While not every Command Villainy deck runs Relentless in the main deck, having 1 or 2 in the sideboard to swap in when you're up against a blue control deck can help turn off all of their removal cards, which are typically how they deal with the massive units command decks are run as finishers. It's really incredible that Maul from Shadows of the Galaxy was a rare and not a legendary, as a 7/6 ambush with Overwhelm for 7 is super strong. If you've got another Underworld unit in play, it can take the damage for Maul when he attacks, but even without another Underworld unit, he's still good enough on his own. Back in the Set 1 meta, there was a card Cell Block Guard, which was a 3-cost 3/3 ground unit Sentinel, which saw play in tons of Villainy decks to help slow down aggressive decks in the ground arena. When Phase 3 Dark Trooper was added to the game, it was an instant replacement in Command Villainy decks. A 3/3 Sentinel that can grow if it survives combat damage is pretty good, especially with all of the 2-cost 2/4s that we've seen coming in Set 5. Lastly here is Salacious Crumb. Crumb can be a real annoyance for your opponent, as he can be returned to your hand and played again round after round, both dealing 1 damage to a ground unit when he's bounced and healing your base for 1 HP when he's played. He's also an Underworld unit, meaning he can soak a hit from all if you have both of them. Twilight of the Republic really didn't add a whole ton to Command Villainy, but Emperor Palpatine players did get Poggle the Lesser, which can generate 1/1 Battle Droid tokens for Palp to sacrifice when he uses his leader ability. That's not a bad engine to get running as early as turn 1. Confederate Courier isn't super strong, but a 2/1 space unit that creates a 1/1 ground unit when it's defeated is sometimes good enough, especially if you're on a budget. And again, not a lot of competitive stuff to choose from here, but I ended up going with Kraken here because at least he gives you 2 1/1 battle droids when he's played, so you're getting some value right away. And if he manages to stick around, he can buff up your tokens by +1/+1, which makes a difference if you're playing a token-themed deck. And this does include TIE Fighter tokens you may be making with Jump to Lightspeed's Darth Vader leader, so again, if you're on a budget, there are worse cards out there. Switching over to Command Heroism, U-Wing Reinforcement is a great card that lets you dig into your deck and play a combination of units that cost up to 7 combined resources. This can either be 3 cheap units to flood the board, or can often be 1 big 7-drop. Battlefield Marine is the most vanilla card on this list, but a 2-cost 3/3 with no text and the Rebel trait is a perfectly fine opening play in a Rebel deck, even a year later. Playing Bright Hope is like building a brick wall in the space arena. A 6 HP Sentinel shuts down a lot of aggressive space rushes, and the ability to return a ground unit to your hand and draw an extra card isn't bad either. Spark of Hope from Shadows of the Galaxy gives Command Heroism a cheap ramp option if you can kill off one of your own units. It's a little less consistent than Resupply, which we'll be seeing in a little bit, but it's still a decent option if you want to maximize your ability to ramp. Sundari Peacekeeper is one of those units that still sees a bit of play despite not having a ton of relevant synergies. The fact that it has Restore 2 and 5 HP is simply good enough that it finds its way into a deck here and there, and it may be what you're looking for too. As a third choice, I went with General Riken. He's another rebel unit with a big body and an interesting ability that allows him to give a friendly unit, including himself, Sentinel, both when he's played and when he attacks. If that unit already has Sentinel, he gives it an experience token instead, meaning if you can find a way to give him Ambush, you can resolve his ability twice, potentially giving any unit Sentinel for the phase and an experience token at the same time. Not bad. Twilight didn't add a ton to command heroism either. Admiral Yularen isn't that bad. With 5 HP and a passive +1 HP to other heroism units, Yularen can make it harder for your opponent to remove your other units, and his high HP makes it so that he's not the easiest to deal with himself. As a 2/2 for 2, Echo is below rate in the early game, but later in the game, if you have at least 2 other units out, a 4/4 for 2 is much better. There really isn't a whole lot to say about Echo, but he is a decent choice if you're looking for another 2-drop. I feel the same way about Shakti that I did about Kraken. She's not really a great card, especially since she doesn't do anything when you play her the way Kraken does. However, she is Force, Jedi, and Republic, so maybe decks will find a way to utilize her after Legends of the Force drops. Taking a look at the purely command cards, resupply is your most consistent form of ramping in Star Wars Unlimited. Getting resources more quickly means not only playing bigger cards than your opponent, but also getting your leader deployed earlier than you otherwise could have, which is super strong. Reinforcement Walker is healing when you need it, and card draw when you don't, both on a massive body. And you get it as soon as you play him, which means even if your opponent gets rid of it, you still got some value. Absolutely great card. Traitorous is a fun one. Paying 5 to steal even a vanilla 3-cost unit from your opponent is strong, but if that unit has some sort of an ability like an on attack, when defeated, or if it was upgraded, it can be enough to make your opponent concede. You may have heard me say a couple times throughout the video so far, if you can find a way to give this unit Ambush. Well, Timely Intervention is one of those ways. For only 1 resource, any unit can be given Ambush and attack an enemy unit right away. Not only that, but you can resource Timely Intervention and still have access to it by paying 2 for its smuggle cost. Price on your head is yet another ramp option, this time in the form of a bounty. You attach this upgrade to an enemy unit, and when that unit is either captured or defeated, you may collect the bounty and put the top card of your deck into play as a resource. Once again, if you're looking for ways to maximize your ramp options, this is another decent pick. Cobb Vanth ended up being my third pick here because his when defeated ability is so good in a jump to lightspeed Thrawn deck, being able to dig up 2 units and play both of them for free. While I don't see him being played in any other decks, he's cheap enough that if you like that sort of ability, you may want to grab him anyway. Let's end command with some strong ones. General's Blade is a lightsaber upgrade that not only gives a unit +3/+3, but if the unit is a Jedi, they gain an on-attack ability that reduces the cost of the next unit you play by 2. This card already sees play, but with all of the Jedi coming in the next set, this card is going to be everywhere. Grab it while you can. Hu Yang was predicted to be one of the best cards in Twilight of the Republic, and while he does see some play, he's nowhere near as popular as players thought he'd be. But again, he has the Jedi trait, which is going to be super relevant in the next set, so maybe he'll make a comeback and prove all of those Twilight predictors right. And finally, Clone Commander Cody is one of those good but not quite good enough cards that has a super strong ability if you can pull it off. If you can get him on a board with 2 other units, he'll give your entire board, except himself, +1/+1 and Overwhelm, which sounds like a win condition all by itself, but unfortunately his measly 4 HP makes him a little too squishy to stick around for long. Still, if you're playing a deck that likes to go wide with units, he might secure a few victories for you. Cunning Villainy has some pretty strong cards, starting with No Good to Me Dead. For only 2 resources, you can not only exhaust a unit, but prevent it from readying in the next regroup phase, meaning it stays exhausted for an entire another round. Fett's Fire Spray definitely saw more play before the Django and Set 1 boba bans, but it's still a card worth having considering the Jump to Lightspeed boba leader is still a competitive leader option. And I mean, it's also just a cool card to have, right? Bosk is a 5-cost 4/5 ambusher that also deals 2 damage to a unit each time you play an event. Bosk saw play early in Unlimited's meta and only really fell out because it was more or less replaced by another unit that we'll see later on this list. Shadows of the Galaxy gave Cunning Villainy the Lurking TIE Phantom, a card that caused so many rules questions about how different cards interacted with it that entire videos exist explaining what does and doesn't kill it. If only we judges knew at the time how easy we had it. I'm looking at you, Jump to Lightspeed Poe. Anyway, Lurking TIE, it's good. Get it. Bazine Natal is a weak unit with a strong effect. Being able to look at your opponent's hand and say, nah, you don't get to keep that card, is powerful enough to make up for her measly stat line. And Forlom here is the unit that more or less replaced Bosk, being 1 resource cheaper while still being able to ambush for 4 damage. You do miss out on the 2 damage per event played, but that's not really a huge loss. Most would agree the 1 resource discount makes up for it. In Twilight, Cunning Villainy got the Elite P-38 Starfighter, which was a staple in Django Fett decks before he got banned. The card doesn't really see a ton of play anymore, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Since you get to assign where the damage from its when played and when defeated abilities go, I'm actually surprised we don't see more of it. Infiltrating Demolisher is one of the examples of the exploit mechanic done right. A 4-cost 4/5 is actually a solid stat line, so being able to cheat this into play for only 2 resources instead makes this card actually pretty scary. Unfortunately, its lack of any sort of ability other than Saboteur means it doesn't really see play. Still, if you're looking for mid-sized droid units, it's a good pick. There weren't really any great third options here, so I settled on the Doorstep. Paying 4 for 3 1/1 battle droids that come into play ready is fine. You can attack with them, you can exploit them to reduce the cost of something bigger, so it's not a terrible card. Have some fun with it. In Heroism, Ezra Bridger is actually a great card, and it's only going to get better in Set 5. A 3-cost 3/4 that can let you peek at the top card of your deck and even play it if you want is pretty awesome. And he's Force, Rebel, and Spectre. Yeah, grab this card. Just remember that his ability only triggers if he survives his attack. Let the record show that FFG agrees, Han Solo being a 6/6 ambush for 7 that deals combat damage before the defender means that Han definitely shot first. This card used to be the top end of many Cunning Heroism decks, and while there are a few other options both now and coming in Set 5, Han here is still a really good choice when it comes to late game plays. Like Bazine Natal, Spark of Rebellion lets you look at your opponent's hand and say, nope, get rid of that card, and while you don't get a 1/3 body with Spark of Rebellion, your opponent also doesn't get to draw a replacement card afterwards. If you're looking for ways to disrupt your opponent's game plan, this is a great pick. Little Grogu here may only be a 0/5, but his ability to exhaust any unit is actually quite powerful. On top of that, a 2-cost Force unit is totally relevant both now and certainly in the future. Kira doesn't discard a card from your opponent's hand, but you do still get to look at it and then name a card that will cost your opponent 3 more to play. Worth noting that the card you named does not have to be a card currently in their hand. This is yet another strong method of disruption that you should consider if you're playing Cunning Heroism. Shadows of the Galaxy's Millennium Falcon is a 5/5 ambush for 6 resources if played from hand, but can also be smuggled into play for the same cost, just without ambush. It's not a bad choice, especially with all of the pilots that were just added to the game in Jump to Lightspeed. Okay, Plo Koon from Twilight of the Republic, must-have card. Go get it. No, really. If you have any thoughts of playing Cunning Heroism, buy 3 of this card immediately. He's super strong in the meta right now, and he's only going to get stronger after Legends of the Force. Not kidding. Enfys Nest is another late-game bomb like Han Solo, and while she might not shoot first, she can return enemy units to their owner's hands both when she's played and when she attacks, which is a great way to close out the game. And R2-D2 here is one of the first 2-cost 2/4s that we've ever seen, and while that stat line is going to become more common soon, his ability is pretty good. You can discard a card in your hand to look at the top 3 cards of your deck and choose one to draw, letting you dig a bit to find a better turn 2 play if your opening hand isn't what you wanted. In pure Cunning, we have to include Surprise Strike. Getting an extra +3 attack power out of nowhere is great and lets your weaker units take out stronger ones, or just lets you attack base for more damage and win the game. Waylay costs you 3 resources to return a unit to its owner's hand. That lets you temporarily get rid of even the largest enemy units for barely any cost, clearing the way for your units to attack base. Sneak Attack lets you play a unit from your hand for 3 less, and since the event itself costs you 2, that means you're getting a 1-cost discount overall, and the unit gets to enter play ready. Sure, it dies at the end of the phase, but if you're able to win the game before that happens, it doesn't really matter, does it? Hotshot DL44 Blaster here may appear to not fit in this category, but think again. While it's actually an aggression card, its smuggle cost requires the cunning aspect, and it lets you attack with the unit you attach it to right away if you play it via smuggle. This card is still fairly meta, and is another great way to surprise your opponent with some extra damage out of nowhere. McClunky lets you bounce an Underworld card back to your hand, and then deal 3 damage to a unit. This can be useful to not only finish off low HP enemy units, but also a way to get a unit back into your hand so that you can replay them again and get their win played ability twice. Speaking of, a new adventure may require you to be running double Cunning, but it lets you immediately replay a unit, removing any damage from it and getting that win played ability right away. In Twilight, breaking in is kinda like having extra copies of Surprise Strike. It's a bit weaker, only adding +2 power instead of 3, but it also gives Saboteur, meaning you can ignore enemy sentinels. I'd probably grab Surprise Strike over this, but if you do want more burst damage options, grab this too. Geonosis Patrol Fighter is one of those cards that I didn't think would see much play, and while it's not amazing, it's still pretty good. Being able to bounce a unit back to hand and leave behind a 3/2 body is good enough that this card has actually been in some tournament-winning decks. Alright, I'm going to make a hot take here and go with Favorable Delegate as my third choice. I think this guy will actually be pretty good specifically in Qui-Gon Jinn decks after Sat 5 drops. With Qui-Gon being able to use the Force to bounce friendly units back to hand, Favorable Delegate will let you draw a card without having to worry about the when defeated afterwards. I could be wrong, but we'll see. Finally, in Vigilance Villainy, you're absolutely going to want to grab Power of the Dark Side. Even though your opponent gets to choose which unit to defeat, paying 3 to potentially remove a huge unit or even a leader is incredibly powerful. Lieutenant Childson has the potential to be a massive sentinel for only 4 resources. Yeah, in order to gain those experience tokens, you have to show a bunch of cards to your opponent, but a lot of the time, showing them a hand full of removal just makes them even more terrified of what you're going to do to the units they'll eventually play. Inferno 4 is a decent turn 1 space unit, letting you look at the top 2 cards of your deck and choose to either leave them on the top or bury on the bottom, which can help smooth out your draws. You get to do it again when Inferno 4 is defeated as well. For Shadows, Dr. Pershing is an amazing card draw engine. If you're playing a control deck, which Vigilance Villainy excels in, dropping Pershing on turn 1 and getting 2 to 3 cards out of him can help you get the removal tools you need before your opponent has time to establish a strong board presence. The Client is another good control tool, dropping a really sturdy unit with 5 HP and a shield that lets you put temporary bounties on units that can heal your base for a whopping 5 HP if you manage to collect. And with all of the removal options you'll have access to, that shouldn't be difficult. Pike Sentinel as a third pick is just a cheap Sentinel unit that can block an attack in the ground arena. Nothing too special here, but leaders like Kira can squeeze some extra value out of a unit like Pike Sentinel by giving it a shield token. In Twilight of the Republic, Devastating Gunship is pretty understated for its cost at only 3/5 for 5, but it can immediately defeat a unit with 2 or less remaining HP when you play it, and If it takes damage, the fact that it has grit means that its power will increase. On top of that, since it's a vehicle, you can stick a pilot on it and buff it up, giving it the potential to grow to some insane power levels. Morgan Elspeth is one that once again doesn't see much play now, but with the Force traits has potential to fit into a deck after set 5 drops. Calculating Magna Guard is interesting because it's a 3-cost, 3/4 Sentinel the phase it's played, and then can regain Sentinel each time a friendly unit is defeated. If you're playing more of a mid-range Vigilance Villainy deck, this card can be pretty good. On the Heroism side of Vigilance, we have Jedi Lightsaber. Do I need to explain why? It's a lightsaber. It gives +3/+3 to a unit, and if it's a Force unit, it debuffs the defender by -2/-2 when it attacks. It's strong. It's going to fit into a ton of set 5 decks. Get it. The Force is with me is here basically for the same reason. With so many Force units coming, being able to buff a unit by +2/+2, give it a shield, and attack with it all in one action is super strong. Obi-Wan here also has incredible Force synergy. He's a 4/6 Sentinel that gives 2 experience tokens to a unit when he dies, and if it's a Force unit, you also get to draw a card. It's an incredibly strong effect. Just be careful if you're going up against a blue-black deck, because the card No Glory Only Results, which takes control of a unit and then defeats it, can really punish the Obi-Wan player. Shadows of the Galaxy added some pretty strong defensive tools to Vigilance Heroism, including Village Protectors. A 3-cost 2/2 Sentinel with a shield means this unit can usually absorb 2 attacks, and that's pretty dang good. Similarly, Concord Dawn Interceptors is only a 1/4 Space Sentinel, but it does gain 2 power when defending, meaning if your opponent attacks into it, it'll hit back for 3 instead of 1. That's a really good way to slow down your opponent if they're trying to rush space. And Kuil here is probably the best turn 1 play you can have in a double blue Heroism deck. His on-attack ability forces you to discard a card from the top of your deck, but if the discarded card shares an aspect color with your base, you get to draw it instead. And if every card in your deck is the same color as your base, that means it's a guaranteed draw. He also has Restore 1, because why not? Surprisingly, Twilight of the Republic doesn't have anything amazing, but Obi-Wan's Aether Spray is a really strong space unit. 5 for a 4/6 isn't bad, and its ability to deal 1 damage to itself, to deal 2 damage to another space unit, both when played and on attack, can really help stabilize the space arena if your opponent has lots of low HP space units. Then both Luminara and Barriss are here on the list because of, again, potential set 5 synergies. Neither see much competitive play currently, but having a large-bodied 7-drop that can heal your base when played, as well as a cheap 1-cost Force unit, may both be relevant cards in the future, so if that's the route you'd like to go, consider picking these up. In pure Vigilance, we can start with Takedown. Takedown is a solid removal card, paying 4 to defeat a unit with 5 or less remaining HP. It's not great, because unless you're using it to defeat a more expensive unit, it doesn't actually help you get ahead of your opponent, but in scenarios where you can use it to defeat a larger unit with low HP, it can come in clutch. It can even be used on leaders if their HP is low enough. It Binds All Things is another one of those Force Synergy cards that I'm kinda gambling on the fact that it'll be good. While I don't think it's quite as strong as the Force is with me, I do think It Binds All Things may see a comeback in set 5 with healing 3 damage and then dealing 3 damage for only 2 resources should be super strong. And then Regional Governor here is interesting because it doesn't actually fit with the point of this video, but I wanted to include it anyway. And what I mean by that is when you play a Regional Governor, you get to name any card in the game, and your opponent can no longer play the named card. This kind of requires you to know what cards your opponent could potentially be playing, which admittedly isn't something that a new player would really be able to do, but it's a strong card regardless, so as your knowledge of the game grows, it might be something that you want to try out. In addition to the defensive cards, Shadows also gave Vigilance some strong removal cards, starting with Fell the Dragon. This card is great at removing high-power late-game bombs for cheap. It doesn't work on leaders, but with no restriction on the target's cost, you will regularly end up spending the 4 resources for this to remove a 7, 8, 9, or even sometimes 10 cost card from your opponent, and it'll feel really great. Rival's Fall is very expensive at 6 resources, but it can defeat just about anything in the game, including leaders. If you want a removal card that doesn't have any restrictions, this is what you want. And top target isn't removal, but is instead a pretty nice healing option. By playing this upgrade on an enemy unit, you'll give it a bounty that lets you heal a unit or base for 4 or 6 HP, depending on whether or not the attached unit was unique. This can definitely help you fight back against some more aggressive decks. And lastly, in Vigilance, we have Perilous Position from Twilight of the Republic. This upgrade exhausts a unit and gives it a permanent -2/-2, very effective against large-bodied units as well as leaders. Equalize is something I wanted to include here because even though it requires running double blue Vigilance, if you're up against decks that run many units, Equalize offers a way to shrink multiple targets at once. I've played a few games with this card and found it quite strong against the right opponents. And we just had to end this category with the Zillow Beast. Firstly, it's a creature, and we know there's some Legends of the Force synergy coming there. And while it's not really competitive, it's still quite strong. A 9-cost 10/10 that gives all enemy ground units -5 power when you play it does actually impact the board, so it's not as slow of a card as most treat it. Though I do find the healing ability is somewhat irrelevant because if you manage to get this into play, you're probably going to want to attack the enemy base and not their units. So I guess it helps keep it alive if your opponent is trying to attack into it over multiple rounds, but yeah, whatever. It's still pretty cool. I did want to include a few cards that are simply Villainy, Heroism, and even neutral cards, starting with Fleet Lieutenant. We saw a bunch of Rebel cards earlier in this video, and a card like Fleet Lieutenant really helps Rebel-themed decks both by increasing damage dealt as well as action cheating by letting you play a unit and attack with a unit in the same turn. Restock is a card that can help prevent you from running out of cards in your deck. In Unlimited, if you have to draw a card from an empty deck, you deal 3 damage to your base per card. It's quite rare, but there do exist some decks that try to win by forcing you to discard cards from your deck until you run out. Restock here is the best way to prevent that from happening. Confiscate here is another sideboard staple. If you're up against an upgrade-heavy deck or even a jump to lightspeed pilot leader, this card can really punish them. It's quite satisfying to wait for your opponent to deploy their leader as a pilot only to have it defeated by a 1-cost event. Tech has an insane ability that gives each of your resourced cards smuggle, meaning you can play anything you've previously resourced. Most of the time, if your opponent can't kill this the turn you play it, you're probably going to pull something out of your resource zone that just helps you win the game. Toro Calican requires you to be playing a bounty hunter themed deck, but if you are, he's incredibly strong, allowing you to ping your own bounty hunters in order to ready him. And if you can get him upgraded somehow, that's a lot of damage you can push all from one unit. Black Sun Starfighter is on here simply because a relatively cheap Space Sentinel is never bad. 3 for a 3/2 is not super impressive, but it's still just enough to fight back against a lot of space threats. Merciless Contest is a symmetrical removal card where each player chooses a non-leader unit to defeat, but if you don't have any units, your opponent still has to defeat something, meaning if you're playing a control deck that runs very few units, this is just Power of the Dark Side without the Vigilance aspect requirement. Sword and Shield Maneuver hasn't seen any play in competitive decks yet, as far as I know, but come on, imagine having a board full of Jedi after Legends of the Force drops and giving them all Sentinel. It could work. On the other hand, Execute Order 66 may be a powerful counter to all of the Jedi-heavy decks we're sure to see. Just make sure you have Clone Trooper tokens to hand to your opponent after you wipe their board full of Jedi units. And before we wrap things up, I do have a couple of honorable mentions. These are just cards that I wanted to include in the list, but maybe thought that they didn't fit in the top 3 or whatever. Just things that I want to throw here at the end. Starting with Yoda, another 3-cost Force Jedi unit. Restore 2, you get to draw a card when it dies. He's pretty solid. Similarly, Kanan Jarrus, 4-cost 4/5, Force Jedi, Rebel Spectre, all totally relevant traits. Solid stat line for the cost, and on attack, you get to discard cards from the top of your opponent's deck based on how many Spectre units you have, and then heal your base based on the number of different aspects on the cards you discard. pretty good. For a cause I believe in is another great way for aggression heroism decks to push for lethal once they get their enemy's base to a low HP remaining value. Force Choke is 2 cost for 5 damage to a non-vehicle unit for aggression villainy. It's not a bad removal card. You even get to discount it by 1 if you have a force unit in play. Tie Advanced, 4 cost for a 3/2 space unit, not great, but you do get to give something to experience tokens. That could be pretty useful. Snowtrooper Lieutenant is kind of the Imperial equivalent to Fleet Lieutenant that we saw earlier. It's both attack power increase and action economy, getting to attack unit while you play a unit. And it didn't really fit into a category, but I wanted to include the Energy Conversion Lab base, even though Data Vault seems to be the command base of choice lately in the meta. Energy Conversion Lab is still a super strong base, allowing you to play a unit that costs 6 or less from your hand and give it ambush. Yes, you do have to still pay for the unit. It is not for free, but this is a super powerful ability that's worth mentioning. In Shadows, we have Architon's Assault Cruiser. This card is a little too expensive to be run in any deck other than Admiral Piet, but if you are running Admiral Piet, whose ability discounts capital ships, Architon's Assault Cruiser is super powerful. 7/8 ambush, and when it attacks and defeats a unit, you get to put that unit into play as a resource. Yeah, at paying only like 6 or 7 for this with Piet makes this card absolutely insane. Val is a super powerful unit in a Thrawn deck, getting to double her when defeated and give 4 experience to something when she dies. Absolutely insane. Palpatine's Return allows you to pull units back to life out of your discard pile, and you're not even paying more because the event costs 6, but then it reduces the cost of the unit by 6 or 8 if it's a force unit, which, again, for synergies, we're going to have it. And lastly, some cards from Twilight. Mace Windu's Lightsaber. We are getting a new Mace Windu unit in set 5, so paying 2 to give a unit +2/+2, and if it's Mace Windu, you draw 2 cards. That's pretty good. Steela Guerrera has actually made it into some decks. She's pretty interesting. 4 for a 4/3, not great, but both when you play it and when she's defeated, you get to deal 2 damage to your base in order to search your deck, the top 8 cards of your deck for a tactic card, and draw it. That can be beneficial if you've got some tactics that you're trying to get your hands on. And, yeah, Jar Jar Binks. He's in the game. There's a card of him. Get it for the memes. Yeah, that's really the only reason I put him there. But that's it for this video. I hope it helped you find some cards that you might want to pick up to add to your collection. If you're an Unlimited player and you think I left something off of this list that should have been on it, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear your opinions as well. If you're looking for more people to play Star Wars Unlimited with, or just talk to people about Star Wars Unlimited, feel free to join my Discord. The link to that is in the video description. Also check out my Do You Know Star Wars Unlimited series, where I have other Unlimited players test their knowledge of cards. It's really entertaining. Please leave a like and a comment and subscribe for more Unlimited content along with other things. Thank you again for watching. I'm Mobius1 here, and I'll see you in the next one.